Hello, I'm Carissa Browning. Today I'm going to walk you through my Turnabout Cowl pattern. This is a free crochet pattern that you can find on Ravelry.com. I've had a few questions about the construction of this cowl, so I wanted to take a moment today and walk you through it. Start with my crochet hook, a locking stitch marker, and my yarn. My first step will be to make a slip knot. And place that on my crochet hook. Tighten it up just a bit. Row 1 starts with a chain 3. So yarn over and pull through. There's 1, 2, and 3. That counts as a double crochet. Now I'm going to put 2 more double crochets into that slip knot. So we'll yarn over, insert my hook into the slip knot again, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. 1 more double crochet into the slip knot, yarn over, insert my hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Now I have a cluster of 3 double crochets. The first one is actually a chain 3, but it counts as a double crochet. So I have a cluster of 3 double crochets into my slip knot. Now I will chain 2, 1, 2, and work 3 more double crochets into the slip knot. So yarn over, insert into my slip knot and pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And again, there's my second double crochet and my third. There we go. Now at the end of row 1, just tighten up that slip knot. At the end of row 1, I have 2 clusters of 3 double crochets each with a chain 2 in the middle. I'm going to use my locking stitch marker to mark that center chain 2 space. That's going to be the center of my rows. Put my crochet hook back in and turn my work over to start row 2. Here we start with a chain 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that counts as a double crochet plus a chain 1. Now into the center chain 2 space from the row below, I'm going to work a cluster of 3 double crochets, a chain 2, and then another cluster of 3 double crochets. So I'll get my stitch marker out of the way. Double crochet. There's 1. And there's 2. And 3. I'll chain 2 and 3 more double crochets into that same space. 1, 2, and 3. So into the center chain 2 space from the row below, I've built 2 clusters of 3 double crochets each, plus a new chain 2 space in the center. So I'll use my stitch marker to mark that new chain 2 space. And to complete row 2, I will chain 1 and work 1 final double crochet into the turning chain from the row below. So insert into turning chain, pull up a loop, and complete my double crochet. So at the end of row 2, we have the 2 original double crochet clusters from row 1, and then row 2 began with a chain 4 that counted as a double crochet and a chain 1, and then we had a cluster of 3 double crochets, a chain 2, and another cluster, all into the center space, chain 1, and 1 final double crochet to finish it. Put my crochet hook back in, and we'll turn our work over to begin row 3. We'll start with chain 3, which counts as a double crochet, and we'll work 2 more double crochets into that first space. 1 and 2. So now, including the chain 3 that counts as a double crochet, we have a cluster of 3 double crochets into that first space. We'll chain 1 and into the center chain 2 space of the row below, we'll work 2 more clusters with a chain 2 in the middle. So I'll remove my stitch marker and get that out of the way for now. And we'll work a double crochet. There's 1, and there's 2, and there's 3, then chain 2, and work 3 more double crochets into that same space. 1, 2, and 3. Now I can use my stitch marker to mark my new center chain 2 space that I just created. And to finish row 3, we'll chain 1 and work 1 final cluster of 3 double crochets into that last space from the row below. There's 1 and 2 and 3. So now at the end of row 3, you can see we started with our cluster of 3 double crochets, chain 1, cluster, chain 2, and cluster into the center, chain 1, and 1 final cluster of 3 double crochets here at the end. So row 1 had 1, 2 clusters, row 2 had 1, 2 clusters, and row 3 has 1, 2, 3, 4 clusters. Put my hook back in, and we'll turn our work over to begin row 4. This starts with a chain 4, which counts as a double crochet plus a chain 1. That's 2, 3, and 4. Counts as a double crochet plus 1. Now I'm going to work a cluster of 3 double crochets into that first space from the row below. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1, and into the center I'm going to work 2 clusters separated by chain 2, just as I have been doing. So got 1 double crochet and 2 and 3, chain 2, and 3 more double crochet into that same space. And 3. And now I can add my stitch marker back to that new centered chain 2 space that I just created. Chain 1. And to finish row 4, I'm going to work another cluster into that last space from the row below. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1 and work 1 final double crochet into the turning chain from the row below. There we are. So at the end of row 4, you can see we started with our chain 4 over here that counted as a double crochet plus a chain 1. We had a cluster, a chain 1, cluster, chain 2, cluster in the center, chain 1, cluster, chain 1, and a single double crochet to finish it off. So row 4 has 1, 2, 3, 4 clusters, just like row 3 did. Then we're going to flip our work over, and for row 5, we'll work a cluster in this space, a cluster in this space, 2 clusters and a chain 2 in the center, a cluster here, and a cluster there. So we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 clusters on row 5. And then we'll turn our work over, and for row 6, we'll start with a chain 4. We'll work a cluster in each space across. We'll work 2 clusters in the center, cluster in each space across this side, and we'll finish with a single double crochet in the turning chain from the row below, just like we did on row 4. So each odd numbered row, we will be increasing by 2 clusters. So we're going to end up making a diamond shape. This point where our original slip knot is, that's going to be the front point of your shawl, of your cowl, excuse me. We'll keep increasing until the width from side to side, diagonally across the square, is the circumference that you want for your cowl. In the pattern, I instructed you to continue until you have 38 clusters across your last repetition of row 6. But you can really make this cowl as big or as small as you want by working more or fewer repeats. Now I'm going to jump ahead and show you another sample that's a little bit further along. To show you the next part, and my yarn magically changes to pink. So in this sample, I have continued to work my increases until I had 10 clusters across the last repetition of row 6. Now row 7 is where it gets a little bit tricky, and I think some people get confused, and that's totally fine. That's what this video is all about. So I've started row 7 on this swatch here. I worked my clusters all the way across this side. I worked 2 clusters in the middle, just like usual. Worked my clusters down this side as well. And now this is where things get changed up a little bit. So at the end of row 7 here, put my hook back in. For our last cluster, we're actually going to use that to join the corners together. So the corner that I'm working on and the opposite corner are going to get pulled around and joined to make this cowl. So we'll start our last cluster here. Actually, I need to do my chain 1 first. Now we'll work 2 of our 3 double crochets into that last space. 1 and 2. And now with our 3rd double crochet, we're actually going to do a double crochet decrease to join this corner to the opposite corner. So we'll go ahead and yarn over, insert our hook into the space, and pull up a loop. But instead of completing that double crochet, we're going to pull the opposite corner around. We're going to insert our hook into the turning chain from the beginning of this row, right there. And where'd my yarn go? And we'll yarn over and draw up a loop. So now we have 4 loops on our hook. I will yarn over and pull through 3 loops now because this is a double crochet decrease. Yarn over again and pull through 2 loops. So now we have finished that last cluster and also joined the corners at the same time. Now row 7 actually keeps going a little bit. It's like a row and a half. So instead of just going up one side, down the other, we're going to go up one side, down the other, and then up again. And that will finish row 7. So we'll go ahead and do our next cluster into the next space. There's 1, oops, and 2, and 3, chain 1, 1, 2, 3, chain 1, 1, 2, 3, chain 1. I'm almost to the center marker again. Keep making clusters until I get there. Missed my yarn over there, didn't I? There we go. And there's my third double crochet, chain 1, one more cluster here. There we go, chain 1. And now for the final center space here, I joined it in the round, but now I'm going to separate again because this corner, the center corner, is going to be the top center of our cowl, so right below your chin when you're wearing it. And we're just going to work a single double crochet into that center space. We're not going to do our double clusters like we've been doing. Just one last double crochet into that space, and that finishes row 7. Excuse me. Now we're going to turn our work around to work on the inside of our cowl, essentially, like the wrong side of the fabric. We're going to begin row 8 with a chain 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That counts as a double crochet and a chain 1. And then we're going to work a cluster into that first space, not the space that the chain 4 is coming from, but the next one. There. Two. And 3. And we'll keep working clusters all the way around until we get back to the center marker on the other side here. So we'll keep working our clusters along this edge all the way along, 3 double crochets in each space until we get back to the center marker again, and we're only going to work 1 double crochet into that space again, and then we'll turn our work and go back the other direction. So our rows will now go this way, separated at the center marker. And I've got another piece to show you a little bit further along. And once again, my yarn is going to magically change colors. Now it's blue. So, put my hand in here so you can see. So this is the spot where I joined the 2 corners and I worked up my rows here. And each row, just as before, we worked 2 clusters in the center chain 2 space. Now we're going to be decreasing, so we're actually going to skip the center space and not work any clusters in that center space of each of the decreasing rows. So now for my last row that I just worked, turn it this way. It started here with a chain 4 that counts as a double crochet and a chain 1. And then I had a cluster, chain 1, and another cluster, chain 1, and another cluster, and you'll see that I skipped that center space from the row below. This is where my decreases will happen. Chain 1 and one more cluster into that space. And then the final stitch was simply a double crochet into that the turning chain from the row below. Now I will turn my work to work the opposite direction. I'll chain 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And now not the space that the chain is connected to, but the next space. I'm going to work my first cluster there. So there's 1 double crochet and 2 and 3, chain 1. Now you can see this next space is my center space from the row below, so that's the one that I want to skip. I'll actually work my next cluster into this space here. So this one over here, I'm going to work 1, 2, 3 double crochets into that space. And then this is my turning chain from the row below, so I will just chain 1 and work 1 last double crochet into that turning chain, not a cluster, just 1 double crochet. Now I will turn my work. So that last, let me show you this real quick. That last row that I just did only had 2 clusters on it. It started with this chain 4 here. It had a cluster, a chain 1. I skipped this space and worked a cluster in the next space. And then I did chain 1 and 1 final double crochet. So I only had 2 clusters on my last row. And that is where the pattern tells you to stop repeating, I believe it's row 9, and work your final row. Put my hook back in, and we'll turn our work over. And our final row, we're simply going to chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we will work a slip stitch into the turning chain from the row below. So we'll reach into that turning chain space, pull up a loop, and pull it all the way through. And then we'll cut our yarn and tie off. And that is the center back of the cowl, so that'll be at the back of your neck. So this is what your cowl looks like. So here are your shoulders, here's your head up here, and there's your cowl. You can make a nice little tassel to go on the end where the slip knot was. Obviously this one is tiny, yours will be much larger, but I hope that this video has given you a better idea of how this cowl is constructed. Thank you.